Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Chinese President Xi Jinping tells South Korean leader Lee Jae-myung he is ready to expand cooperation and jointly address regional challenges. Lee hosts Xi for a state summit and dinner in Gyeongju, seeking Beijing support to revive talks with nuclear-armed North Korea. Israeli media report that body parts handed over by the Red Cross do not belong to any of the missing hostages after forensic examinations were completed. The transfer had followed Israel's return of 30 Palestinian bodies to Gaza, a move seen as part of efforts to sustain the fragile ceasefire despite recent deadly strikes. Taiwan's representative Lin Xin-hai says he met US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent at the APEC summit to discuss semiconductors and safe supply chains. Lin says the 40-minute meeting in Gyeongju focused on technology cooperation as Taipei seeks lower US tariffs on exports beyond. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney confirms he apologised to President Donald Trump over an anti-tariff ad featuring Ronald Reagan that sparked a diplomatic row. Trump responded by slapping an extra 10% tariff on Canadian goods and freezing trade talks, which Carney says will resume when Washington is ready. Russia's defense ministry says its air defenses destroyed 98 Ukrainian drones overnight across multiple regions, including 6 targeting Moscow. The incident marks one of the largest reported wave of drone attacks this year, as Kiev intensifies strikes deep inside Russian territory. Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan secures over 95% of the vote in a landslide election. This is what the state media reports amid an ongoing internet blackout. The result comes after days of deadly protests, with the opposition claiming hundreds killed and the UN reporting credible evidence of at least 10 deaths. China's military says it monitored and tracked a joint Philippine patrol in the disputed South China Sea on October the 30th and the 31st, calling it a threat to stability. The statement comes as the US and Philippines strengthen defense ties, announcing a new joint task force to operate in the region. The G7 energy ministers condemn Russia's attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, calling them devastating and unjustified. Kiev labels the strikes as nuclear terrorism, saying they threaten millions as Moscow intensifies drones and missile attacks on power facilities. Now, Jordan and Germany have issued a statement stressing the international stabilisation force to be deployed in Gaza during the transition period must operate under a United Nations mandate. As the first phase of the Gaza peace deal takes effect and is being implemented by both sides, work is now underway on the second phase of the plan. This has been a specific demand, as a United Nations mandate would provide the plan with a legal basis and, more importantly, political legitimacy for the force. Under the US-brokered ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, a coalition of Arab and Muslim nations is expected to deploy forces in the Palestinian territories. The force will train Palestinian security personnel to secure border areas and prevent the smuggling of weapons to Hamas. The United Nations mandate would also provide an operational framework for the international force, ensuring impartiality and the non-use of force except in the case of self-defense or the defense of the mandate. Now joining us here is Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for joining us here on the programme. Of course, this first phase of the Donald Trump brokered ceasefire deal is well underway, even though many are describing it, of course, as extremely fragile with strikes having occurred and violence having occurred post October the 10th when it was implemented. Of course, this demand for a United Nations mandate. Why is this important to bring the deal legitimacy?
Absolutely important, Thomas. United Nations has done this many times. So basically, I'm a bit disappointed why the United Nations itself, why the Secretary General Guterres himself doesn't propose that, rather leaving countries to make proposals, Americans, Arab countries, and everybody else. It should come directly from the top of the United Nations. Without hesitations. United Nations did it many times in 17 peace operations, as far as I can remember, in the last 10 years only. So yes, United Nations is the global organization with global legitimacy, with obviously experience, skills, mandates. It will be mandated by the United Nations Security Council. And for that matter, that's what brings that global legitimacy. And every country in the world must comply with decisions of the United Nations Security Council, including Israel, including the state of Palestine, and so on. So basically, United Nations is the best organization to give legitimacy to the post-conflict reconstruction, and we remember such operations in Cambodia, in Timor-Leste, in Sierra Leone, in former Yugoslavia. Many other situations ended up with the Cyprus, and for many years. The United Nations is there for almost 50 years in Cyprus. So yes, that's the way ahead. United Nations should mandate peacekeeping force. They should be deployed in Gaza, and all the reconstruction and building of institutions, ensuring rule of law, human rights, first and foremost, of course, food, medicine, recovery, reconciliation, should be taken care in a kind of a holistic, multi-dimensional way, as it was done in the situations that I just listed.
Yes, of course, and Israel has said that it does want a say in who governs Gaza and who is part of this international stabilisation force that is going to be deployed into the enclave during this transitional period. Also, the United Nations, Israel has a very complicated relationship with the United Nations. Can you see any problems arising here if a United Nations mandate is put in effect, of course, particularly with Israel?
I think it will happen. Again, after the ceasefire, it's much more easier rather than before. Of course, Israel expressed several times some disappointment with some statements by some United Nations officials, but that was in the past. In the terms of the longer-term peace and security and development of the region, obviously Israel will accept a broad, transparent United Nations force. Obviously, that force will secure the territory. It will ensure that there is no terrorist activities anymore in Gaza. There is no illegal weapons smuggling and all of that. So basically, Israel is concerned about its security, but I see absolutely no way why United Nations peacekeeping force in Gaza can be a problem for Israel. Exactly the opposite, being legitimate, being composed by troops from all over the world. Doesn't need to be only Arab countries. It could be anybody. Basically, Israel can say which country can contribute troops to that peacekeeping operation in Gaza. There shouldn't be absolutely no problem.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky. Do stay with us as we have some further updates. US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth met Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles on the sidelines of the ASEAN Defence Ministerial meeting in Kuala Lumpur today. reaffirming their shared commitment to a stable and secure Indo-Pacific. Both leaders emphasized the importance of cooperation to maintain regional order, with Marles welcoming that he shared a strong American presence. Hegseth and Marles highlighted the US-Australia alliance as central to ensuring freedom of navigation and upholding a rules-based international order. Let's take a listen into both of them.
I hope the American people, everyone understands the deep ties that have been and continue to be between the U.S. and Australia. And they continue today. The exercises we do together, the way we cooperate in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity to continue it with you. Peace through strength means working with our best and closest allies, and Australia has long been one of them.
And in saying that, I'd really want to acknowledge your presence here in the Indo-Pacific. It really matters to Australia to see a strong American presence in this part of the world, and you are definitely providing that, because what we do together is uphold the rules-based order, and we've been doing that throughout our relationship, very much since the end of the Second World War. And there is much for us to discuss in terms of American force posture in Australia, AUKUS, the deep way in which our defence forces are embedded, particularly in the Indo-Pacific.
The meeting comes amid growing concerns over US constituency in its regional policy, its heavy military focus and tensions arising from trade and political disagreements with allies. Analysts note that such friction, including disputes over tariffs, defence spending and political interference, could challenge Washington's credibility among Indo-Pacific partners. Professor Popovsky joins us again. In your view, is this a reaffirmation, a sign of strength, or an anxiety about America's long-term reliability in the Indo-Pacific?
I think it's a good news, Thomas, because when defense secretaries discuss security issues and discuss regional security, especially when it comes from two democratic countries such as Australia and the United States, that's always a good news. And they calculate the risks, the possibilities, the threats coming from obviously here we have mostly China to be concerned with, but generally I think it's a good news. By the way, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States have long relationship in military cooperation, going back to what we used to have during the Cold War, and which is Australia, New Zealand, United States, kind of a military agreement, military cooperation agreement at the time, which includes mostly information sharing, intelligence, monitoring, if risks arise, then definitely that goes further into some joint exercises, some deployment, and I think this is a good news. By the way, it comes in parallel with other agreements, which also United States is negotiating in the region, such the trip which Donald Trump made to Malaysia, to South Korea, Japan, met with the Chinese president, including. Generally, I regard this trip as very much strengthening the United States presence, and not only military presence, but rather diplomatic, political, economic presence in the region, which obviously is good news. We've seen also the India-United States cooperation developing very well when it comes to trade agreement. The discussion goes on a new bilateral trade agreement, on possible further extension of the military cooperation between India and the United States. I see this always as good news.
Yes, Professor.
These are peaceful countries. So if two peaceful countries talk about defense and intelligence, there is always nothing to worry about.
Yes, Professor Veselin Popovsky, thank you very much for bringing your insight and discussing that with us. Pleasure to have you on the program as always. Now we move on, and China is accusing the Philippines of stirring up trouble in the South China Sea after Manila held joint patrols earlier this week. A spokesperson for the Chinese People's Liberation Army's Southern Theater Command said the drills conducted from October the 30th to the 31st seriously undermined regional peace and stability. Beijing said it closely monitored and tracked the patrols, calling the Philippines a troublemaker and a destroyer of regional stability. The joint exercise involved the armed forces of Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines and the United States, with Washington's 7th Fleet saying the operation showed a collective commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. We are now joined by Collins Chong-Yu Keat. He is a foreign affairs, security and strategy analyst, and he joins us from University Malaya in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much for joining us, Collins, here on the program. It's a pleasure to have you. Beijing has accused the Philippines of stirring up trouble in the South China Sea after these recent drills with the United States, with Australia and New Zealand. Do you see this as China feeling concerned, or is it a deliberate warning to deter further multilateral action in its backyard, and also, of course, a sea that it sees as its own?
Well, it is certainly a new front being shown, a new joint deterrence being shown by Philippines together with allies, with the Americans. With the presence of President Trump last week and the presence of Pete Hegseth now in the ASEAN Defense Ministerial Summit, we have seen how the message has been clear and powerful to Beijing that the era of this region being used as the backyard of China is now over. So this new power presence is a very powerful message to Beijing that the US is here to stay with allies, with the Australians, and of course with the potentiality of reining in the bellicosity of Beijing, and for Beijing to accuse Manila of stirring up troubles, of undermining regional peace and stability, it is hypocritical, because it is Beijing who has been violating the rules-based order. It is Beijing who has been having these assertive actions in South China Sea, who have been bulldozing and having these gray zone activities, testing the waters, testing responses by Manila and testing the responses by the Americans. So I think it is a very needed move, and hot on the heels of this newfound momentum by Washington in terms of rallying regional support, in terms of getting the regional buy-in, in terms of also maintaining the need for the sanctity of the maritime law and international law. So I think Beijing is certainly feeling the jitters. They are anxious about the newfound momentum and the backing of President Trump himself. He has stated that Washington is 100% behind this region. And Hegseth's message has been clear since the Shangri-La dialogue a couple of months ago, and until now, recently, the ASEAN Defense meeting. The message has been clear and powerful that the peace and stability of this region lies in support, unwavering support of the Americans, and the Americans are here to stay with this region. Thomas.
Yes, and Collins, whose narrative is gaining traction across Southeast Asia now, Beijing's or Manila's, when it comes to maritime security?
Of course, the region has been yearning for the support and trust and the attention by the administration of President Trump now. During the first term, we have been we have been anxious about the readiness of Washington under Trump back then to increase its pivot or its presence here. And now that with this visit by Trump himself and by Hegseth, I think the message now is clear, and the region is now getting the confidence, the trust, and they have been yearning for this, and they have been getting the need to appease and to be aligned with Trump's vision in this part of the world. And that's why, hence, you can see the various moves by the region to ensure that they also show reciprocity in terms of trade, in terms of tariff, to ensure that Trump is engaged, and Trump's attention has always been in this region. So we have achieved that. So I would say that the narrative has been clear since a couple of weeks ago that the Washington's presence is now back, and the region now feels safer. we have more trust in President Trump's vision in this region, and we are now more confident that Trump will not turn his back towards against us. And since it can be seen now from his talks with President Xi a couple of years ago that this region has always been in the focus by Washington in terms of also the advantages that this region can provide to Washington in terms of critical minerals, in terms of maritime route security, and in the overall interest of Washington in the quest to halt region's momentum. So I would say that confidence is riding high in this region, not only with the Americans, but also with regional powers, that we have now got the increased deterrence capacity with the backing of President Trump mostly. Thomas.
Yes, Collins, do stay with us. We have further updates coming out of the region now. Leaders from across the Indo-Pacific have gathered in Malaysia's capital city, Kuala Lumpur, today for the 12th ASEAN Defence Ministers meeting. Plus, the high-level meeting hosted by Malaysian Defence Minister Mohammed Khaled Nordin has brought together ASEAN members and 8 dialogue partners, including the United States, China, Japan, Russia, India, and others. The focus was on regional security, maritime safety, and counterterrorism in the Indo-Pacific region. Speaking at the ceremony, the Malaysian Defence Minister has expressed deep concern over the humanitarian tragedy in Gaza and called on all nations to use their influence responsibly. Let's take a listen into the statements.
Malaysia expresses our deep concern over the humanitarian tragedy in Gaza and Palestine, where starvation and deprivation are being used as weapons of war. Malaysia urges all nations, especially major powers, to exercise their influence in accordance with the international law.
Additionally, the Malaysian Defence Minister has welcomed support from partners, including the United States and fellow ASEAN members, in promoting a peaceful resolution to regional border disputes. Let's listen in.
Malaysia welcomes the United States' comprehensive plan to end the conflict in Gaza. Closer to home, Malaysia also commends Cambodia and Thailand for demonstrating constructive dialogue to resolve border disputes. And we highly appreciate the support of partners, especially the United States, the rest of ASEAN, and China in promoting this peaceful resolution.
In a subsequent development, Malaysia has officially handed over the ASEAN Defence Chairmanship to the Philippines. It will now be leading the regional defence agenda and host a series of meetings next year. US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth was also present at the handover, following his participation in the ADMM Plus meeting. His visit comes amid global reactions to US President Donald Trump's announcement that the United States would begin testing its nuclear weapons, which is a move that has drawn concern across Southeast Asia. Collins joins us once again to discuss this. Of course, ASEAN partners and ASEAN, of course, are discussing maritime safety and counterterrorism. And now, of course, with a huge US presence in the Indo-Pacific, ASEAN would say, to help stabilize the region. Do these shared agendas still outweigh the deep strategic mistrust among these major powers that are present at this meeting?
The level of the interdependence in terms of economic and, of course, the security dependence by ASEAN towards these two main powers, China and the US. We have also seen this fragmentation, this fragmented in terms of individual ASEAN member states with regards to increasing their own defense capacity or their defense reliance. Vietnam, for example, has this multifaceted defense partnership with Russia, also with China and the US. And of course, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia share the same foreign policy approach, where it's mainly based on strategic hedging and balancing, without the need to be pivoting towards one side or the other. So we have seen how for the past couple of years now, there have been consistent efforts by ASEAN as a whole to increase its joint capacities and capabilities in terms of interoperability in terms of joint patrols and joint activities, but they have not been sufficient to send up to China and to provide this needed deterrence against China. So the reality has always been that ASEAN or individual ASEAN members will need to rely on external powers. And in this regard, we have seen how other powers, including the EU, in terms of European powers, we have the Germans, we have the French, we have the Britons, we have been here now in this part of the world trying to fill the gap, but they have not been successful. They have been tied up with their concerns in Europe with Ukraine. Russia has tried to do the same to increase its own power influence here. But the reality lies on the ground that the truth has always been that only the US has the capacity, both the trust and the historical legacy and the hard power capability to ensure that the region's peace, safety, and stability are maintained, and to uphold the rules-based order and to uphold the sanity of the international law. And the region realizes this. But of course, on public, they are tied by this ASEAN model of centrality and neutrality. They are not allowed to be seen to be pivoting towards Washington, at the expense of Beijing for the fear of upsetting the apple cart. So this has been the case now. We have so many different mechanisms in ASEAN. We have the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. We have the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon Free Zone. But they have been futile over the past decades, and despite the efforts by ASEAN to be a power connector and power balancer in terms of using dialogue and diplomacy to deter conflicts, we still see the presence of the Chinese nuclear submarines in the South China Sea, for example, despite these mechanisms. And despite the outright, condemnation of the risk posed by AUKUS, we still see behind the scenes, behind the curtain, the region has been yearning for this stability, this stabilizing presence of AUKUS, the stabilizing presence of the US forces. So this has been a reality that ASEAN policymakers need to face. And moving forward, we are still very much reliant on Washington's hard power presence here in this region.
Yes, thank you very much, Collins, for joining us here on the programme. It's a pleasure to have you here on NewsX World. And we now move over to Europe for our final story. And flights have resumed at Berlin and Brandenburg Airport after nearly a 2-hour shutdown caused by unidentified drones spotted in the area on Friday night. Airport officials say takeoffs and landings were suspended from 8:08 to 9:58 p.m. local time, forcing a number of flights to divert to other German cities. Authorities in Brandenburg State confirmed that a patrol car and a police helicopter were deployed after the report of a drone sighting. One was seen, but its operator remains unidentified. The temporary ban on night flights was relaxed to ease the backlog, and officials now say the immediate danger has passed. The incident comes amid a growing number of drone scares across Europe, including at airports in Denmark, Norway, Poland and Germany, with several countries suggesting possible Russian involvement. Germany's Interior Minister has called for stronger detection and counter-drone measures, describing the incidents as part of a hybrid threat. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has told Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto that he hopes the two countries will continue to cooperate in military security. He has also said that the countries must build on existing collaborations such as the joint development of fighter jets. The two leaders held talks on the sidelines of the APEC forum being held in Gyeongju, South Korea. A decade ago, South Korea and Indonesia agreed to jointly develop KF-21 jets. Since then, the two countries agreed to cut Indonesia's contribution to the project. Indonesia's Prabowo has said that discussions with South Korea over the fighter projects are now continuing. And that is all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.